This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. Don't miss a moment on or off the field. Make every day a highlight with LASIK at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIK.
Hello and welcome back. Edward Osovich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. A happy Friday bye week to you. Before we get out of, I was going to say Dodge, not leaving town, going to stay around and watch football all weekend. We do want to get into a little bit more of the Around the Corner, as we do per usual here on Fridays on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. Before we get all of the questions, taking your questions from the Crimson Corner and bringing them here and answering them with a little bit of levity or maybe seriousness, let us tell you about our good friends over at Huel, Huel.com/Soonerscoop. I don't know why I always say backslash. It's a slash. Huel.com/Soonerscoop. And comes with this, the shaker bottle. And I've been using this powder religiously every morning. It's a chaotic morning, and it's something for easy, on the go, ready to be taken in within you. How about that?
It's very filling. It's easy to make. Obviously, like you said, you just use a shaker, but 400 calories, 40 grams of protein. I'm a big fan. I've been drinking these in the morning, the Daily Greens that got all sorts of vitamins and minerals, superfoods, 4 grams of fiber. Get your electrolytes in the morning. That's really important, Eddie. I know you don't get your electrolytes in, so you need to be drinking these.
I do when I drink the greens.
There you go. So this is really good stuff. And they also have the shakes right here. They're ready to drink meals.
All you can do is go to the website. You can check out all the different flavors that they have. I know that Carrie's kind of gone through the, the lexicon of all of it. But the moral of the story is Huel.com/Soonerscoop for new customers. 15% off when you use the promo code Soonerscoop. That is Huel.com/Soonerscoop. Thank you to our good friends over at Huel. All right, we will get into the rest of the program now here as we take a bunch of your questions from the Crimson Quarter, obviously the largest online website or online community for Oklahoma fans. Everybody's kind of going through it here. You got the bye week coming up, then very, very important football on the other side, George.
I had a good joke there. You said it was the biggest online website. That'd be awesome if Soonerscoop was the largest website in the internet.
We're trying to do that, but something tells me Pornhub will always remain elite. Here we go, though. Let's start out with some questions coming back from Knoxville. Baker Stash wants to know, this one's for Eddie. I asked George in his mailbag, but what moments will you remember most from last Saturday night? It could be a specific play, crowd reaction, pregame, bonus, best food you guys ate on the trip in Knoxville. I would say the best meal that we had was probably the only meal I think that we had in Knoxville.
Yeah.
And it was
Stock and Barrel.
Stock and Barrel. I was trying to think of the restaurant.
It's so
fantastic burger. It was kind of one of those places that I think had been recommended to us, and or maybe we just stumbled upon it, but we waited for 20 minutes for a reason. It was fantastic. It was one of the better burgers we've had. As for moments, pregame never experienced anything like that. I thought that was incredible from the light show. Even I know that we had talked about it, I think on the instant reaction, George, 30 minutes before kickoff, which, usually you have people that kind of fill in before the ball is actually kicked, but it seemed like a packed stadium from the get-go. I'll remember that. And then, I think obviously just the way that they won, my parents were there, so I would look up and see them in the stands a couple times. They were obviously very happy with the final outcome, but it was kind of just the totality of the night, knowing what the moment meant for Brent Venables. Seeing him walk off the field, I thought was pretty cool. Kind of arm in arm, not arm in arm, but him and John Mateer kind of walked off together. It was like, damn, that was a really important moment for them.
Yeah, I think the two things that people will remember, 10 years, 20 years from now about this game is R. Mason Thomas's fumble return, and Tate Sandell making all those field goals.
No doubt.
So those are my answers. But yeah, I think just the whole win and experience is something people will be talking about for a long time.
I think each one of the Tate Sandell field goals, and you could see it in the sights and sounds that we put together you can watch it here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. I'm right underneath the field goal, underneath the goalpost, the crossbar. And I usually just listen to how the crowd reacts. Obviously on the road, you're going to get a much quieter crowd. At home, people are going to start cheering when they realize the ball's going to go through. Each time it was like halfway there, is that going to get over the goalpost or the crossbar? And certainly it did. But yeah, the R. Mason Thomas thing, That ranks right up there with Sterling Shepard, like jumping into the end zone, which I think might have been the same corner that R. Mason ended up in.
That
or
sounds
it was
right.
or it was the opposite end. I can't remember. It goes down in, kind of the Sooner lore, as we've talked about, throughout the
I think
league.
it was, though, because the overtime was in where the student section was, and that was the side of the student section, right?
It was,
but then did it flip in the second overtime?
See, that's what I can't remember.
Huh.
I think it did, though, because I remember racing down to the other end, and then obviously for the Zach Sanchez interception that ended the game, I ran in from the sideline. So yeah, I think they did flip ends in the overtime periods. But yeah, unbelievable weekend. It was an incredible performance, and I don't know. I'm going to be thinking multiple times throughout the week, like, that's going to spur them on to go win a national championship now. I'm sick. I know. All right, let's continue on. The coaching carousel in full swing. The Great 1405 gives all your wild takes about the coaching carousel. Bonus, gun to your head, does this program have a playoff appearance this year or next at least?
Give us your wild takes about the coaching. I don't know if I have a wild take. I guess my wild take is I think some of these jobs, I don't know who they're gonna hire. I think that's one thing. I heard Steve Sarkisian talk about this. It's like all these people want to fire their head coach. Well, who are you hiring? And I know I've heard some of the people say, well, you can't think like that. Well, I'm thinking like that because I don't think there's just a ton of obvious options. I think that I think maybe my wild take is I think the Auburn job might be better than the Florida job. I don't even know if that's a wild take. Like, I just don't know how good the Florida job actually is.
The great Peter Burns had thrown that out there.
Yeah.
I still think the Florida job's a really good job. I think obviously, like, it's one of those things, like, at the end of the day, they're all pretty good jobs. When you're winning, and especially in college football with some of the programs that have openings right now, the fervor and the excitement from the fan base is always going to be there.
My hesitation with saying they're all good jobs is like, I don't know the ins and outs and the structure of some of those places. And I think that's super critical in today's world of having some sort of structure. Like the LSU job, I think is a great job. I don't know if I want to be dealing with the governor of the state, though. Like, I think that or all the changes they're having in their athletic administration. So
it's tough. And seeing Wisconsin stick with Luke Fickell on Thursday,
that's a bad decision.
They now qualify as an unserious program in a way.
As someone who just said all these teams shouldn't be just firing their head coaches, they should fire Luke.
When
Fickell.
You got problems, you got problems. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see which way this goes. Playoff berth, the bonus question with the gun to your head.
I'm going to say yes. I don't know which year. I don't know if they're asking me gun to my head this year or next year. If they're saying one of the next 2 years, I say I do think they're going to make it either this year or next year.
Well, if it's not this year, putting a lot of eggs in the basket.
If they have all these guys that are going to come back,
sure.
I think that they're going to be pretty damn good next year.
We talked about the offensive line with the trio of freshmen, Eddie Pierre-Louis and Michael Fasusi, Ryan Fodje. It is hard to imagine that those guys aren't going to continue to get better. And if you can get a bunch of guys back, build some momentum off of this Tennessee win. Like, I think that's kind of the next step, right? It's the logical step of, okay, you did this. You got over the hump in Knoxville. What do you make of it now? Can you turn this into a special season? And then all of a sudden, I think that our Mason Thomas play goes up, skyrockets up the list of great Sooner plays over the last 25 years. All right, we were going to throw out a hot take, but I think that leads to question number 3 from the Crimson Quarter. Bass Bone Sooner. Oh, nope. I was about to say, that's not the one that we were going after here.
That's on Carey.
But we will get it. And I think the question is going to pertain to one Lincoln Riley, which is, a fun name around these parts. But I know the Josh Pate interview or podcast that he did with Taylor Lewan and Will Compton made its waves on Wednesday night. MG Sooner. Can Kerry Murdoch fly to Los Angeles on Friday for the sole purpose of asking Lincoln in his postgame if he's going to be the next head coach at LSU? I'm prepared to donate towards Kerry's expenses for this. And if you don't remember, the night of the Bedlam game before he goes to Los Angeles, Kerry asked him in the postgame press conference that we were not allowed to be in the same room because of, what was it called? COVID is how George usually says it. We couldn't be there. He cuts him off. Basically lies to everybody that he jets out to Los Angeles the next day.
I actually asked Kerry this exact question last night when that Pate clip came up. I was like, we need to send you to Los Angeles.
You know, they walk across that street every day to practice. I think me and Carrie just having the camera for the sake of old times.
That'd be awesome.
It would be incredible video.
I do. The Lincoln Riley stuff is interesting.
Is he on the move? How about that? I'll ask my own question.
I kind of think yes. I'm buying into the thought that he is, because some of the stuff coming out of USC and the power struggle, and there's some talk that Lincoln maybe doesn't have some the control over the personnel and roster, and how are they getting some of these recruits and all of that. USC's obviously they're having an okay year, probably a pretty good year for their standard right now. At
they're still on the table. They're in the playoff, able to run the table and make it to a playoff.
In the playoff hunt is what I mean, but I don't think they're going to get there. But I kind of think he's going to the NFL. I've convinced myself that that it's not a college job that he's after, it's the NFL. Because I don't think he wants to coach in the SEC. I don't think Penn State would hire him in the Big Ten. Maybe
I don't know if he wants to coach in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I don't know if he and my theory is I don't know if he wants to coach college football.
Sure.
I could definitely see Lincoln being somebody that doesn't want to do all of the new stuff that's going on, and he can go to the NFL, just coach, be a great offensive mind, and I think he could probably actually have some success. And I think it would be a decent fit in Nashville, him and Cam Ward, and I think he'd fit there. So.
There'll be other jobs open. New York Giants maybe comes open if Brian Daboll can't get things figured out. Lincoln Riley, Jackson Dart, maybe. I don't know.
It's a trickle down effect of if he jumps from USC, who does USC hire? I have no idea.
I guess it wouldn't work out with Jackson Dart. He left USC for a reason, but neither here nor there. It'll be interesting. I'm always going to be. I
hope he ends up in the.
I'm a little bit of a stand to always kind of follow and track what he does, and quietly, secretly.
Are you still blocked?
Very publicly cheer against him. Yeah, definitely still blocked. I will say this though, in talking about a hypothetical, it would be incredible. The theater that would be. If OU and USC could play in a playoff game this year. A playoff game.
A playoff game? Maybe, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, that's why I said hypothetically.
I think it'd be hilarious.
What about an 8-9 matchup in Norman or the Coliseum?
I think it's more likely they play in a bowl game and Lincoln's not the coach anymore because he's left for another job.
That'd be such a downer, but I know that Oklahoma fans on
very
Twitter
on brand.
Would be very excited to basically form the narrative that he's running away from yet another program. I don't know. We'll see. All right, non-con games. Let's get back to some serious business here. Non-con games. Suter J with the transfer portal only being in the winter. I believe it opens on, January 2nd this year, I think, is what I read earlier today. Do we possibly see a spring game return instead of that abomination that was forced this spring?
I think there's a better chance there's no spring anything than the spring game coming back. I don't know that. That's just a guess.
Interesting.
But I just kind of think that it's just going to go away. I know is I would rather have nothing than whatever that was last year. So I hope they bring back the spring game. I think the fans really like it. I personally, it's not my favorite thing to cover, but it was way better to cover than whatever we watched last year, which was basically throw the football around for a couple hours and do nothing. So I'm a fan of whatever is different than what they did a year ago.
I'm a fan of not having it on Masters weekend. And if you really, truly want to get me excited and a fan base excited, allow these teams, and it was a little bit of the talk last year. I know Prime talked about
play each other.
To have some teams play each other, get some type of.
You're seeing it in baseball.
You could even do the fall baseball. You started talking about fall baseball. Yeah, OU played Tech in a fall game. I think about an 18-inning affair, or 16 innings, I think, whatever it was. You could even do what some of these high school teams do now, where you invite 6 or 7 teams in, and you have one-on-ones with offensive line, defensive line, and then you just breed some type of competition amongst
call up
the teams.
OSU, SMU, North Texas, Tulsa.
Now, I don't know how you would be able to handle everybody in the stands if you were bringing 5-6 teams together, but I think it'd be fun at the very least until somebody gets hurt, and then you're like, well, shit, that wasn't a great idea. We'd blame somebody else. All right, let's go to Bill Bedenbaugh. We talked about it a little bit on the William and Lauren practice report on Thursday, talking about the offensive line and the tremendous work he's done with some of these young freshmen. The question is, I never know how to pronounce that. Mitchell 98. Is Coach BB, Bill Bedenbaugh, off the hot seat with some scoopers? It's hard not to be smiling looking at the upside at the young pups, Fasusi, EPL, Fodje. I would tap the retweet button.
Yeah, I mean, I was always of the opinion that, was he ever really on the hot seat? Like, this is a guy that is considered the best in the business at what he does.
Even when we were putting people on the hot seat, I don't know if we ever got to the point where
I personally was never one, let's go, they got to get rid of Bill.
And not to mention what they have with Caden Penny, what they have with Cooper Hackett out of Fort Gibson.
And that was kind of my thing. Like, I do understand some of the criticisms, and it hasn't been good enough the last few years, but in terms of the talent that they have on the current roster and the talent they're recruiting, I was always like, hey, I understand why some people might want to move on, but I think you can't. And I think Bill's also showing how good he is of what this offensive line is now doing this year. Piecing this thing together, getting those young guys ready. And also it's been very similar to last year in terms of shuffling guys up front, but they've had a lot more success. And I think that's somewhat because of the talent he's brought in and the way that he's handled it. So yeah, I would say he's safe, and who knows, maybe he wants to leave, but I don't think that's the case. So
no, it seems like he's in it for the long haul, and if you can bring back this nucleus that is a rather young offensive line group, I think that the question is could you win a Joe Moore Award over the next couple of years? Obviously, if you get John Mateer back, you feel like you have a pretty good base.
You're getting pretty far ahead there.
I know. I was just thinking in the back of my brain that they rushed for 100 yards in the last 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I'm wondering if this group can win the Joe Moore Award in 2026. Once again, very sick in my head. All right, let's get to a couple more questions about the coaches. Let's say the recent improvements on offense continue to happen and OU wins the next 2 or 3 or the next 3 or 3. Do you keep the offensive position coaches that have underperformed for multiple years or move on? This does not include BB. It's a really good question because I think that each one of those units is going to have to play well for Oklahoma to win in Tuscaloosa or come back home and obviously finish off the home schedule.
I think that, let me say this, I think there's also a scenario where OU doesn't have to make that decision. I think that there's a scenario where a couple of those guys maybe make that decision on their own.
Sure.
And pursue other endeavors or, go somewhere else or, decide not to coach. I don't know. But I think that I would still probably make a move at tight end at this point just because the talent in there is just not great. I think they're playing better for sure. Caden Helms especially has played well the last couple of weeks, and I think he's progressing and all of that. Running back, I'm kind of indifferent on. I think that some of what happened this year is out of DeMarco Murray's control in some ways, especially with Xavier Robinson being hurt. I think Xavier Robinson was probably going to be the guy the whole year if he hadn't gotten hurt early in the season.
Remember we were talking about it in week 2 with the Michigan game and the way that Xavier Robinson was able to kind of come in and be able to help close that game out.
So I think that some of that is understandable, but I'm not ready to sit here and just say oh no, you can't make any moves. I still think that you're looking at maybe making a couple changes,
which I think is healthy, being open to anything here by the end of the season. Don't really talk about absolutes a whole lot in college football anymore, but I think that when you're talking about Ryan Fodje and Michael Fasusi, you can talk about some absolutes. It looks like those two are going to be the tackles of the future at the University of Oklahoma, which brings us to our next question. Tabrahama Sinju. That was a tough one. With Fasusi and Fodje locking down those tackle spots, where does that leave someone like Logan Howland? Can he play inside or will he be portal bound at the end of the season? Great question. And as I was going through it in my brain, it's I kind of forgot about Logan Howland that's been on the availability report the last couple of weeks.
I don't think he'd play inside. I think it would have to be, for him, a really tough decision. Do you try to come back and compete with those two guys and trying to get a starting spot? I think it depends on where does Oklahoma see Ryan Fodje's future. If it's now at right tackle, I think that Logan might have to make a tough decision. If it's not at right tackle, if they say, hey, you're just doing this for the rest of the year and then we'll move you back to guard, then I think that door obviously opens for Logan to compete for that starting job. Maybe, and I think he'd still be allowed to compete either way, but I don't know. I think that it's one of those things we kind of have to see how it plays out. But I certainly think that if you're like saying, well, who are the portal candidates? I think there's a lot of guys in that offensive line room that could probably be thrown onto that list just because you're starting to see some of these young guys emerge. And I'm sure some of those older guys are like, hey, am I going to get to play?
Sure. So. And we've seen it, though. And obviously, Ryan Fodje has this opportunity because of injuries in front of him. Do you want to stay and be a part of something just in terms of an offensive line? We talked about the defense and building depth on that side of the football. You got to be able to do that on the offensive side of the football if you really want to get to, I think, the level that a lot of people feel like this thing could get to if you're able to build off the momentum here that you've built during 2025. Speaking of the other side, with Derek Simmons. That's the next way we'll go here on the Around the Corner this week. Derek Simmons, when Derek Simmons comes back, do you start Fodje at tackle?
I would. Look, I think I like Derek Simmons. He was playing good football before he got hurt.
Sure.
So it's a tough decision. And if they decide to start Derek Simmons, I don't blame him either. Like but I think the way that Fodje has played these last couple weeks, and you have to think about the future too, and all of that. Like, I just think that the ceiling is a little bit higher. I think that sucks for Derek if that ends up being what happens, but I kind of would roll with Fodje. I don't think you mess up a good thing, right? Like, don't try to fix something that's not, broke. And they're running the football well right now. If Fodje goes out there and, say he can't block the edge for Alabama or Missouri or whoever, then put Derek Simmons in the game, give him a shot. And maybe he comes in and he plays great, So I think that it's going to end up being a luxury if he comes back from the concussion stuff, because then all of a sudden you do have some depth, because they've been living on the edge the last couple of weeks where they've had no one. Logan Howland was, available but hobbled. Derek Simmons obviously unavailable. They had no one else. It was Daniel Akinkumi, Luke Baklenko. So I think that you hope that Derek can be somebody that can still help you, but I would stick with Ryan Fodje at this point.
It's early, right? Getting into Alabama week, but do you have a gut feel if either of those guys are going to be available next week?
On Logan
and Derek
I think
Simmons?
Logan's good to go. Okay. I think he's getting there. Derek, I don't know.
That's a little bit trickier, right? With the concussion issues.
It's tough. The one that I'd watch for is Jacob Sexton. This is about the time of year that I was told Jacob Sexton was going to be close to getting back. So where does he figure into the equation?
Sure.
I have no idea. Again, I wouldn't take either one of those true freshmen off the field though right now.
Playing really good football. All right, let's continue with a little bit of the theme here, talking about injuries. There was a major one for the Oklahoma program in Knoxville. R. Mason Thomas had the greatest individual effort play that I can remember, other than maybe Mims' catch down at the Cotton Bowl and staying in bounds versus Texas during the comeback in 2023. Any others you can think of? Just single play strain, I believe, is the word that would be used around the Switzer Center.
Man,
putting you on the spot here.
CeeDee Lamb had a play. He had two plays.
The Texas play?
Texas play, but that one was more of Texas just running into each other. He had a play against Kansas State when they lost on the road, and it was like a screen pass, and he took it 70 yards, and it felt like he made a million guys miss. He had another one against Iowa State that same season. It was the year that he almost won the Biletnikoff, and he would have won it if not for, I think was it Jamar Chase that won it that year, or Justin Jefferson, one of those two. The LSU guy won it. So he had a couple.
It's easier to think of all the offensive plays.
The obvious one?
What's that?
All-time great play by an Oklahoma Sooner. Ronaldo Works against Alabama.
Speaking of.
That was an all-time
was that
effort
01, 02, something like that?
I think it was 02. The run against Alabama late in that game to set up the win. That's a all-timer.
I'm going to hate myself because I'm going to start thinking about it, and then I'm going to remember as I'm driving back to Oklahoma City tonight. But certainly, I mean, I definitely remember like particular performances just overall, like Antonio Perkins returning
the
three punts against UCLA.
How about it wasn't a scoring play or an offensive play, but the Trey Brown rundown of the Baylor wide receiver in the Big 12 championship, that was an all-time effort play.
Could have completely changed the narrative of that game.
Yeah.
Oklahoma gets off the field and they end up winning the Big 12 championship.
Baker had a really good run against TCU in Fort Worth, if I remember correctly, ran over a guy.
Just put his shoulder down
for a touchdown. I think
sounds very much like something Baker Mayfield would do.
Kyler Murray had some runs. I mean,
the run down the sideline against Texas.
Yeah, he also had the one against Kansas that was
also
really
had one
good.
against West Virginia that same year as well.
There's a lot to think about. There's a ton, but the R. Mason one is certainly up there.
It was a moment.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that. I just kept thinking, like, as I'm following him with the camera, like, surely they're going to blow a whistle at some point, and they're going to say he was either down or, out
of bounds.
Out of bounds. I was just, and then it got to the point of, okay, well then kick the extra point. What are we waiting on here?
Yeah,
it was wild. All right, let's continue on. Talking, I believe, Alabama offensive line. Does Alabama have the best offensive line that will face this season?
I personally think so. I thought Tennessee's at the time was the best.
Sure.
I think Alabama's is pretty good. They've been able to do a pretty good job protecting Ty Simpson. Now, I think Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Alabama are all around the same. You look at the sack numbers. I don't know. I can look it up. I don't know Alabama's off the top of my head. I know Tennessee and Ole Miss both were two of the best in the country, but I think Alabama's is going to be tough. And that's why you hope R. Mason Thomas can maybe play in that game. I don't have any insight on that.
Sure.
But
it's going to be yet another game.
Alabama has allowed 15 sacks.
Okay. And I think the number was 7 for Tennessee going into the game.
Yeah, Tennessee's up to 13. Ole Miss has only allowed 8 this year. Texas A&M.
No, that's what it was. It was Ole Miss that I was thinking of.
Ole Miss came in as one of the best in the country. Texas A&M, first in the conference, they've only allowed 7. Oklahoma has allowed 20. So not terrible. But
hey, I don't think they're getting to 50 like they were last
50,
year.
That was bad, man. That was bad.
Sometimes it's hard to remember that everybody survived that. Everybody lived through it. All right, let's move on. Big games ahead for Oklahoma. Cyber Freddy. The debate over 10-2 versus 9-3 playoff contention is hot right now. Does 10-2 assure us a playoff berth? I think we both agree with that. Yes.
Yep.
Is a playoff berth at 9-3 something that you see a legitimate possibility? I'm going to say, I said I'm waning on that. You've done your work. You've kind of talked me into the idea. There's certainly things that would have to happen.
Yeah. If they're 9-3, I mean, one, I personally would, and this coming from obviously somebody who covers Oklahoma, I feel like they would deserve to be in. Does that mean they get in? I don't know.
It's the one thing that everybody talks about, though, when you're talking about Oklahoma, is the resume of a schedule. And we talked about this at the beginning a year ago when they announced it. It was going to be one of the toughest schedules of the country.
And part of the hard part with this too is like that schedule that looked so daunting before the season, and it still was. Like, people are going to say, well, maybe the OU schedule wasn't actually that hard. That's BS. It is as hard as it was supposed to be. The problem is like a Missouri. Let's say Missouri goes and loses to Texas A&M this weekend. They're going to be out of the rankings.
Right.
All of a sudden, a game that would be a ranked win for Oklahoma if they win that game is probably no longer a ranked win. They're going to finish unranked.
And a lot of it has to do with Bo Prabula not playing.
Yeah, Tennessee, another team that they could lose another game and all of a sudden they're not ranked, and so there goes away your other ranked win. Michigan, I think they're going to end up being ranked by the end of the year, but they could lose and drop out of the rankings. So some of that matters. And then I think at 9-3, what ultimately matters is Notre Dame. You need to root against Notre Dame. And I think even at 10-2, there's still a chance for Oklahoma to get in with Notre Dame. Both of them get in, but you'll need Texas to lose. Sure. You can't be tied with Texas. You can't have the same record as Texas at 9-3. They'll put Texas in ahead of Oklahoma. You need to root for the Big 12 to only get one team in. And I know there's a lot of people out there that want to say, well, you need BYU to win this weekend. I actually don't think that. I think that there's a world that if Texas Tech wins this game and then wins out and then beats BYU again, then just Texas Tech is going to get in.
Or BYU loses on the road at Cincinnati.
Exactly. I do wonder what the committee thinks of a Utah at 10-2 over a 9-3 SEC team. And then you need the ACC to only get one team in. So that's the path. If a 9-3 team is going to get in, you need only one Big 12, one ACC, or you need Notre Dame to lose.
And a lot of this is going to change.
The other one to watch
this weekend, next weekend, and the week after.
The other one to watch is Oregon.
Sure.
There's a very real world where Oregon gets knocked out because their resume is not good. There's a reason they're ranked 9th, and it's because their best win right now is against Northwestern.
Crazy.
So there's a very real world where they could get knocked out.
So you're going to kind of put me up against it. Do I have to cheer against Northwestern on Friday night when they go to the Mecca?
No. Okay. You want USC to get knocked out.
Okay.
And that also,
I can do that.
You want USC to get knocked out and be out of the rankings, because then then Notre Dame no longer has a ranked win.
Sure. Great point. That's why Georgia's around. All right, we continue on. A final scenario. Oh boy, this is a big one. Wishbone Willie. Shout out Willie. Obviously, we're going to win out and go to the playoffs, but let's assume for a moment that we end up going 9-3 and there is no God. I'll listen. Rank which version of 9-3 is best for Brent for next season for our fragile fan psyche. Rankings from best to worst, in my opinion. Home closer heartbreak. So you beat Alabama, you beat Missouri, and then somehow LSU comes into Norman and walks out with a win. It's better to have loved and almost playoffed than never have almost playoffed at all. Tamed the Tigers. You beat Missouri and LSU, but you go on the road this next week and you lose to Alabama. And this is the one that would, I think, put a lot of people into a little bit of a situation. You beat Alabama, you close the season with LSU, but you stumble against Missouri.
Yeah, I think that's the worst one. You can't lose to Missouri at home, especially a Missouri team that is going to be playing a true freshman quarterback. And I think Missouri's defense is really good. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't know how good Missouri really is. And I also think, obviously the bad blood there, fans would not be happy. I would maybe switch the two, just because if you go and you beat Alabama, the expectation from there on out is you're in the playoff, you're going to take care of business. The expectation is you're in. I think if they were to come home and lose one of those two games, especially an LSU game that, they fired their head coach,
sure,
got it at home, it's to get into the playoff. If you were to lose that, I think people would be pissed all off season. And especially if it's a close game and there's probably some gaffes there.
You'd almost just be wiping away all the good fortunes that you built and wins.
And all
you
think about all off season, whereas you'd be thinking all off season about, man, that LSU game. Whereas this game, if you go lose to Alabama on the road, a top 5 team, one of the best teams in the country right now, the way they're playing, I'm not saying that that's just acceptable, right? Because the standard is to win every single game. But I do think that the fan base, for the most part, the realistic ones can be that was a tough ask to go to Alabama and win that football game. So, I think that you can live with that. Whereas if you come home and you've just beat Alabama, you're a top 8 team. Sure. You're going to be hosting a playoff game, and you lose to LSU.
I'd be on the
precipice. That would not be good.
That would be a Eskridge Lexus postgame podcast that I'm sure you would.
And I think Oklahoma. I do think Oklahoma's shots of getting in at 9-3 would be better with a win over Alabama and a loss against LSU than a loss to Alabama and a win over LSU.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
Because I do think at the end of the day, quality wins are better than quality losses.
100%. I think the committee definitely has kind of shown that.
Yeah.
Maybe. All right, we'll continue on. Final question of the week. Okie Heel. Let's say OU makes the playoffs. What are some fun or intriguing matchups you guys would love to see against the Sooners? Or what locations would you guys like to go to if it's a road playoff game? This is something that
we've talked about this
during the downtime. We talk about quite often.
Yeah.
And how wild would it be if OU and Texas somehow met in the first round of the playoffs in Austin or Norman? You've got to think that'll happen eventually, right?
I actually do think that's going to happen in our lifetimes. I don't know if it's going to happen this year.
I just don't even know
it could happen this year if both these teams win out. Let's say Texas goes 10-2 and OU goes 10-2. There's a very real scenario where, I guess they would have to be like the 8-9 seed.
I think that's maybe one of the only ways that it could happen.
Unless let's say Texas wins out and they get up to like the 5 seed or the 6 seed, and OU gets in at 9-3 as the 11 seed. Then you could do it, or flip it, or Texas gets in at 9-3 and OU gets in at 10. So that would be fun.
The whole experience at Jerry World for the Big 12 championship game with OU and Texas was so just different from the usual OU Texas experience that I think the bizarreness that would come with a home game against Texas or us going down to Austin, a place that I've never seen a game at, obviously.
I think for me, in terms of I mean, it'd be awesome if they went to Austin. It would just be crazy. The matchups though that we've talked about, I would love to go to Notre Dame,
South Bend's cool,
or Notre Dame come here.
Awesome place.
It'd be very fun. Oregon I think would be sweet. Would be awesome.
What about Lubbock, Texas?
No, I don't. I've been to Lubbock. I want to go somewhere.
You haven't been.
Now, if OU drew Texas Tech, I think that'd be a great draw for Oklahoma. I think they could win that game. I think BYU would be fun.
Went there last year. That was fun.
It'd be a great setting to go there. I'm trying to think who else is in the hunt. Any of the ACC teams? No, I don't want to go to Virginia or Atlanta for Georgia Tech or something.
I thought you had been to Charlottesville before.
I've never been there.
You went to a rally up there at one point.
Okay. All right, that's enough of that. Is there any that you?
No, I say ditto. I think South Bend would be awesome.
I don't want an SEC unless it's Texas. I don't want an SEC. And
what if it ended up being a place that we haven't gone before, like in Athens?
That'd be cool, I guess. But again, they play in Athens next year to see, and I know for the fans out there, they don't care.
Yeah.
What are like my
this is definitely a selfish question just in terms of
my thought
what
process.
do we want?
I want to go somewhere that I've never been to cover a game. Or like is very tradition rich in terms of like a Notre Dame or an Oregon. Like it would be a lot of fun to go on that type of trip or have one of those teams come to Norman. That'd be electric. Like if Oregon came here to play in a playoff game.
Every once in a while, you're okay to daydream about what Norman would be like if they were to host something like that.
You know what would also be cool? And I don't think this is a possibility this year because they'll probably go undefeated and be one of the top 4 seeds. But Indiana, I'm not saying they have a great atmosphere, but I've heard Bloomington's pretty sweet. So I think that'd be kind of fun.
Mike Caddick to show us around Bloomington.
It would be
the case.
Here's one. You mentioned it earlier. How about the Mecca? We go out there to USC.
It would be an incredible week.
It'd be wild.
The content that we could deliver that week.
The YouTube page.
I would stage a break-in of Lincoln Riley's house. So be it. All right, that's going to do it for Around the Corner. George, have a good bye week. We will reconvene on Monday, and it begins another. Here we are again.
We told you before
massive
the season,
week.
Every week was going to be the biggest game of the week of the year.
Really looking forward to the trip down to Tuscaloosa next weekend, though. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I don't know. You can daydream about it, but if they were to get out of there with a win, the fun we could have over the next couple of weeks with LSU and Missouri. So for George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. You can sign up for Suitor Scoop right now. Just $1. We got plenty of content rolling out. Crossover season as well. Saturday night, OU basketball headed up to Spokane, Washington, take on Gonzaga. On Monday night, the women playing UCLA in Sacramento. Should be a lot of fun here as we get rolling into the winter, kind of. George, Eddie, see you back here on the SuitorScoop.com YouTube channel.